In this part of the workshop, we'll be talking about some different things that you can do to enhance your worksheets, to tell a better story, or to make it more readable. There are different effects that we can use. These are going to include simple changes like changing the font size and color and maybe the background of cells, to inserting clip art and word art and shapes and things like that. We'll also cover including charts that take your numeric data and represent them in a graphic format. So in this grading worksheet that we've been working with, we already have some changes that set some objects off. For instance, we changed the alignment and the orientation of the headings in row 1 so that we would not have to make the columns so wide. This gives us a way to make the columns pretty narrow, and so the numbers kind of are tightly knit in there, but they're still readable. We didn't need to make any major types of changes to the numeric formatting because these are just general numbers. So there was no currency or percentages or anything that we really needed to add. But we did change the color of the numbers in the points possible row to set them off. As this is the standard for the grades. This is not an individual student's grades. We also talked about increasing and decreasing the decimal places, and for instance in this average field here I can click the decrease decimal and remove the decimal places, and I'm not actually cutting them off or truncating them, I'm actually rounding the number as I do that. Okay, so some other things that we can do are to change the size of the font. And one of the things we can do in this particular worksheet possibly is to change the size of the student names or the styles of the font of the student names. So when you want to change fonts in a certain cell range, you select that range with your selection pointer and you simply go to your home tab to make that change. And let's say I want to just make this a different type of font, and I'll make it different enough that you'll be able to tell. I'm going to change it to Baskerville Old Face. Now this may or may not be something you would want to do, but you see that it does set the names off a little bit. And I might want to change the color of that font as well, and I'll go ahead and change that color to the same green as the points possible here. Another thing that I do pretty commonly in my grade book sheets is to take the different rows and make them different shading. Now there's an automatic way of doing this in Excel, and I'll show you that in just a little bit, but I actually like to do it manually by selecting the row that I want, and I can select multiple rows that are not next to each other by holding the control key down as I select the next row. And so I'm just selecting every other row here, making sure that I hold down the control key. I didn't hold down the control key on the first row that I selected, but after that, after I selected the first row and I let go of the mouse button, I held the control key down once I started selecting the next row, the Fred Flintstone row. And then I could let go again, and then when I went to select the Optimus Prime row, I held down the control key again before I started selecting. Now I'm just going to make this a very simple change. I can make a change using the fill color button. This is kind of like a shading, and if I click the arrow on the end of that button, I'll see various options here. And since I'm kind of in the green, I'll use some green shading. That may or may not be very attractive, but at least you can see it. But you can see the preview as I've chosen one of the green colors here. And so that's going to leave those rows with shading. And I haven't actually clicked, so as I'm moving around to the different colors, it's previewing them for me. That actually might be nicer. It's a little lavender color. So I'll choose that and then click away from it. And now I have basically given myself a little bit more readability so that I can read across these rows. And this is just something that I've found helps me in large grade books. Of course, this just has a few rows in it, but you might have 40 or 50 lines, and some folks might have it even bigger than that. And this would help you to follow that student's grades across. Something else that we can do for readability at this point, in addition to shading the different rows, is to do something called a freeze panes. And it's on the View tab. And it's important to choose where you want to freeze. I want to be able to scroll through all of the grades and keep the students' names in column A visible on the screen. So I don't want column A to scroll off, and I don't want row 1 to scroll off either. So what I will do is click in the cell where those two items intersect, where row 1 and column A intersect, and strangely enough, that's really at B2. And so what's going to happen, if you want to visualize it, you're going to create a little crosshair in the corner where we've selected that cell. So what I want to go now to is that View tab, and then go to the Freeze Panes, and I just want to choose Freeze Panes. That is going to freeze above where I have selected and to the left of where I've selected. So it's going to freeze above row 2 and to the left of column B. And so that's going to create what I want. And hopefully you can see the little crosshairs that appeared here. Now when I scroll over, you'll notice that the student name remains in column A. And so I could go all the way over and just get a viewing like that. Now scrolling down is not going to be that helpful because it's such a short worksheet, but I can also do the same thing if I wanted to scroll and see the headings remain, but the names would scroll up. To remove that, I simply click the Freeze Panes button again and then choose Unfreeze Panes. Let's take a look at the attendance sheet as we look at some other things that we can do. This one already has some simple shading, some gray shading in it. And it also, if you notice, has a check mark instead of a traditional letter in the cell. This actually is done with a special font, the Webdings font. If I go to the Home tab, you'll see that Webdings is what's selected. And I actually just typed an A in here to get this check mark. So that's a nice little easy way of getting a special symbol. Let me just click in a blank area just to show you what I mean. This is the font in this area is not Webdings, it's Arial. So when I type in, let's say, a T, I'll just get a plain old T. But if I go back and change this to Webdings, and I'll scroll all the way down. There's Webdings, Wingdings. Well, let's see what it is in Webdings. It's actually like a train icon. Now I actually had to go through and search to see which character would create a check mark, and you could do that. But that's something simple because you only need to use the keyboard to type in a letter if you wanted to insert something. I'll just try a couple of different letters. This is an H, an L, a Z, and a B. Just to give you an example of how easy it is to insert a symbol once you find what it is and the letter that's associated with it. Okay, back to a normal zoom here. And this is, again, it's just the way I keep attendance. And one of the things that I showed in the face-to-face workshop was how I've got the dates in here. If I click in cell C1, I actually put a date in there to begin with. And this was probably the first day of classes in the spring of 2012. And in the next cell, I'm adding 2 to it because our classes are Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So if I started on a Monday, then the next date of class would be 2 days later. And then the third day of class would be 7 days later. So that is a formula where I'm adding a week to the previous Monday. And I kind of follow that pattern, 2 days later, and then 7 days from the previous Monday or the previous first day of class. And so that shows you that you can do arithmetic operations with dates, which is kind of helpful in a lot of cases. You're going to notice that on certain days I didn't have attendance. For instance, on February 20th and 22nd, I didn't record attendance for anyone because this was a Mardi Gras holiday. What I like to do in this case is insert an object called WordArt, and I actually create a label for that Mardi Gras holiday. So I'm going to the Insert tab and then taking a look at WordArt. And I'll just choose something that you can see well. And it creates, I just clicked on one of the styles there, and it creates an object that I can move around and put my mouse on the border here to drag it around. And I'm going to put my text inside here, so I actually can see a I-beam pointer. And so if I click inside that box, I'll get a blinking insertion point, and I can delete the text that's there, and I'll add in Mardi Gras holiday. And then what I want to do is I want to move it, I want to rotate it around so that it fits long ways into this area, and I want to make it smaller. So there are a couple of things that I need to do to accomplish that. First of all, I need to make the text a little bit smaller. So I'll go to the Home tab, and it's probably hard for you to see, but the border of this WordArt is now solid. If I click in the middle of it, I'll see a dotted line. That indicates to me that the entire object is not selected. I need to click a second time to select the entire object. And that way, when I make a change to the font, it's going to take into account everything inside of that border. So I'm going to take that font down quite a bit to, let's say, 24. And the handle on an object like this, when you see this little green handle, it is a rotate handle. So it's kind of tricky on your eyes, but if you put your mouse on the handle and you hold down the left mouse button and drag, you can rotate that box and then grab one of the borders with your drag and drop pointer and pull it into place. And so that is one way of using WordArt in a practical way, from my perspective. One of the other things that we can do, let's say I wanted to insert an object that told me when I had a test day. So go back to the Insert tab and then to Shapes. And there are lots of different shapes that you can use. The block arrows are a good object to use in a lot of cases. What happens is when you select an object from Shapes, you get a crosshair pointer, and that means that you've got to drag. You hold down you place it somewhere in the worksheet, your pointer. Hold down the left mouse button while you drag out down into the left or right to create that shape. And you get the border like you did on the WordArt, and you get the handles to resize. And you also get the rotation. And so if I wanted to just point to a certain date, I can do that. Notice that when I create an object like this, I'm getting a special tab to pop up that just applies to that object. This was not here before. In fact, if I click away from the object, it goes away. So if I want to make changes to this object, I've got to select it, and then I get this tab. It's called a contextual tab, and so I can make changes to it. One of the things I can do is change the color. under Shape Fill. I can change the outline. I can say I'm just going to take the outline away. And so I can also make it a little bit smaller. I can make it shorter by dragging the handles around and move it around like that. Finally, another fun thing to do in a worksheet is to incorporate images, clip art, or maybe even a picture that you've taken and saved, or a picture that you have from some other source. But we're going to just try it with clip art. These kinds of things are on the insert menu, and if you click on clip art, you'll get a task pane to open up on the right side here. And for instance, let's say I want to put a symbol for each of my students here. This is not something I would do, but just for fun. Let's try to see if we can, I don't think they'll have Flintstones, but I'm going to search for Flintstones. Let's see if I can find a picture. No result, so let's see if I can find a caveman. So I've got a caveman, and I'm just going to pick one of the ones that pops up here. The picture will get incorporated into the worksheet. It's pretty large. I want to get it small enough so that it can fit next to Fred's name. So I am going to change the size. You can do that, since it's easy to grab the handles, you can do that by grabbing one of the corners. And if you grab the corners, you're going to resize proportionally. The height and the width will change at the same time. You can also change using your contextual tab. When the picture is selected, remember you're going to get the tab just for that picture. And there's a size area on the end of that tab, and if I just choose either height or width, I can change the height and width at the same time. I'm just clicking the down arrow here, and I'm really going to get it really tiny. Can't even really see it now, but then I want to drag it up to be next to Fred's name. And I'll just do one other one. I'm just putting in cat to search for pictures of cats, and so we'll click on that. And again, we've got one that's pretty big. I've been in class where students incorporate huge pictures that are so big they can't even find the corners. So in that case, it really is helpful to have the size handles. You can also, I clicked on the arrows here, but you can also go in and highlight and just change with the keyboard. I'm highlighting that 6.91 height. I'm going to change it to a 2 and hit the enter key. And I have resized that image to a manageable size, and now I'll just drag it down and then put it up in place. So again, not something probably that you would do, but it is it's just nice to know how to incorporate those types of things into a worksheet if it would help make a better presentation. So let's move on to working with charts. We'll close this clip art. And so if you've got the workshop files, open up the chart practice file. And it actually opens up to the sales sheet. I'd like you to bring the pop sheet to the front. And we're going to review some of the things that we've already done. First of all, we're going to rename the sheet tab from just the plain old pop to population data. So in order to rename a sheet, we can right-click, choose rename, and then just type in the new name. We're also going to select data to insert a line chart. Now a line chart, and you'll see in the results, it shows variations over time. And when you're creating charts, that's one of the things you need to consider is what type of chart is going to describe your data in the best way. Generally, if you have increments of years, like we see here where we've got decades, 1940, 1950, 1960, and so forth, where you've got multiple time periods, more than likely that's going to be a line chart, or a line chart could represent that data correctly. So in order to create this chart, we want to get all of the headings that we need. So if it's telling us to start in cell A2, which is a blank cell, but we need to start there because in order to create a rectangle around all of the data that we need, that's the corner that we need to start in. So we will select A2 through H4 and simply go to the Insert tab and the Charts area, and we'll go to the line chart. And you can choose any one of these. We'll choose the line chart with markers. That inserts the line chart, and so now we've got some things that are overlapping each other. Let's drag our chart out of the way so that it'll be seen. And step 3 asks us to update the chart layout to show a data table at the bottom. And there are several different ways of doing this. First of all, notice that since we've got the chart selected, we have the 3 Chart Tools tabs: Design, Layout, and Format. So since we are changing the chart layout, let's try the Layout tab under Chart Tools. And we are also being asked to show a data table at the bottom. Data tables, titles, axis titles, legends, and so forth are all considered labels. So if we take a look at the group, the labels group, we'll see data table. And one of the options for a data table is to just show it at the bottom. So it really is incorporating our data from the numeric area of the spreadsheet into the chart. We're also going to review what we learned about shapes to show, to put an arrow in this, this chart that shows the largest difference in population, which would be about right here in 1960. Just eyeing it, we could do a numeric, actually a subtraction to see what is the exact largest place, but I believe that would be good enough. So also on this layout tab, we have shapes. Now we could also go back to the Insert tab to insert a shape. There are several places you can do it, but it's nice and conveniently placed on the Layout tab. So let's do a different type of arrow than we did before. Let's go down to the block arrows again, but this time let's just choose one like this. And I'll come out here to draw it just so that we come out to a different location. And so we are just going to insert this chart right here, or insert this shape. Let's say we wanted to label this shape. We didn't do that before. We can right click it and choose Edit Text, and we'll just type in largest difference in population. And I typed it so big that I've got to make my shape a little bit bigger. Finally, we are going to take this chart and move it to its own location, or to its own sheet. So again, we need to click the chart to select it, and this is going to be on the Design tab. The location of the chart, moving the chart, is on that Design tab for Chart Tools. So if we click that option, get a little dialog box that asks us if we want to move it to a completely new sheet, which is what we want to do, or leave it as an object in population data, which is what it is right now. We want to choose the new sheet option, and we will call this sheet population line chart, as it says in step 5. And click OK. And so that moves that chart to its own sheet. Notice it did not move the shape. We could actually cut and paste that shape onto the chart here. And we could resize it. Maybe one of the things we could do is reposition it. Probably not the best thing. But you see the options that you have there in adding a shape to a chart. So let's go back and take a look at the sales tab and see what we're doing here. We're also going to rename this sheet tab to sales data. So right click sales, rename, change that name. We will add labels and functions for totals in column F and row 6. Again, this is a review of what we have been doing before. So let's put a label for total in column F and also down in row 6. And the functions should be just sums. Quick little shortcut way of doing a sum across multiple columns is to select all of the cells where you want that function to go, and then if I choose the auto sum function, I'm going to get a sum function in every one of those cells. Same thing for column F. Choose all of the cells where you want that function to go, and then I can actually just click right in the middle of the auto sum button because it's going to default to the sum function. Our next instruction asks us to format the numerics in row 2 and row 6 as currency. Again, I'll select the numerics in row 2, and then I let go of the mouse button and the mouse completely. I hold down the control key while I then go back and select row 6. So this way I can change all of these things at the same time. And I will simply just choose the currency formatting on the Home tab to select that format. Step 4 asks us to insert a row above row 1 and then add a title, quarterly sales by region, merge and center that title and increase it so that it shows up a little bit better. So remember, to insert a row above a particular row, you need to select that row, and actually if I select it, I can use the insert button here, but I can also right click to get the insert option. Since I've right clicked on the entire row, it knows that I'm inserting an entire row. So I get a blank row here. In cell A1, I will type in the title. Then I'm being asked to merge and center, so I'm selecting from A1 to F1, select the merge and center button, and then while that is still selected, I'll change my font, make it a little bit bigger. Then in step 5, we are asked to add bold formatting to all headings and center the quarterly headings. So again, we can select everything at the same time. We'll even include the title. And again, I've let go of the mouse completely and the mouse button. And if I want to select the headings now here in column A, I'll hold down the control key and select them. And then that will apply bold to everything. We'll also, while we're at it, increase the width of column A, just so that we can see the headings in column A there. And then we need to center the quarterly headings. So from B2 through E2, we'll select those and click the Center Alignment button. We could do the same thing with region and total. I'll center those two. Then in step 6, we're asked to add borders below the quarterly headings and above the totals row, and add shading to the merged cell A1. So borders, we have not talked much about borders yet, but a border can go on the top, bottom, or left, right sides of a particular cell. I'm going to select everything across this row 2 here, all of the data, not the entire row, but everything from column A through column F, and then I'll take a look at the border tool in the font group on the Home tab. Actually, the default right now is a bottom border, and that's what they're asking us to do. But if you click the arrow, you'll see you have some predefined formats. You also have some custom format on this More Borders option here. And so here we can tell Excel exactly where we want to put the border. You can choose a particular style and even a color. I'm just going to leave it at automatic. And then if I click below here, I'll have a bottom border. Or I can also click the little icon that says the bottom border. So that will apply a bottom border to that area that I just selected there. It also asks me to add a border above the totals row. So I will select the data in that row. And this time, instead of below, I'm going to choose that same style that I did before, and I'll click the icon to add the border above. So again, we're just adding a little bit of readability here. We also are going to add shading to our title cell here in A1. Just a little subtle shading maybe. And click away from it to see it. Finally, we're going to add a clustered column chart. And since this is showing data in multiple regions and multiple time frames, a column chart will display this data correctly. Now it's very important that when we select the data, we get the headings that we need, but notice that we're only going to E6. A2 through E6 does not include the totals. Now I'll show you what will happen if you include the totals. Don't do this. But if you include the totals and then go and insert that clustered column chart, you're going to get a chart that has a big total on the end that distorts all of your data. So you don't want to do that. Now I'm going to go back and delete my chart, select it and press the delete key, and this time I'm going to select the correct data that just includes the raw data for the quarters, and when I insert my clustered column chart, I'll get a better representation of my raw data. And the reason for creating a chart in the first place is to give a good visual representation of the data. You can quickly look at this chart and tell me who had the highest sales in each quarter. Looks like the Northeast is doing better than everybody. And maybe next would be the Southwest. But you can tell different stories by looking at this data. You could also look at the numeric data and tell the same story, but it's a much easier and much simpler way to look at the data. I'm going to move this chart to its own sheet as well, and we'll play around a little bit with the formatting. Just call it sales chart. And one of the things that we can do is add a title. You're going to notice again, since we've got the chart selected, we've got the chart tools, and so we've got a design, layout, and format. And we'll leave the chart style the way it is, but note that you could change it to different styles. But this is a good default style for us. We can also add some common layout formatting, where you can see if we click the different options here, we can change where the legend is and the title, and add a title, remove a title, by selecting a combination of layout options with this particular menu item. For instance, if I click layout 9, it will format my chart so that I've got a chart title here, an axis title in place, and I just need to change those things. So if I now click on the chart title, I can change that to sales by quarter. And if I want to make the axis title something different, I'll just say quarters. Sometimes you don't need labels because things are self-explanatory. And the rotated axis title is kind of tricky when you're updating it. I'll just say sales amount. So you can do that. You can also individually change things. For instance, let's say I wanted to move the legend to a different location. If I click on the layout tab and then go to legend, I can show the legend at the bottom instead of on the side. So you can play around with how you want to present the data. It really is a very individual choice for each project that you would have, depending on your audience and who you're presenting the data to and how you want to tell the story. But everything you need is in these 3 tabs here with the design, layout, and format to change this chart.